Hello, my name is Crystal Petrie, and you are watching season 3 of the Crystal Petrie podcast. Today, we are talking about when is it time to bring in help, whether that's a real assistant or a virtual assistant, and how smart time management can transform your hustle into harmony. Here to educate us on our need for help, because sometimes, Conrad, I feel like people just feel like they should just do it all by themselves, or they can do it all by themselves. Welcome to the podcast, Conrad.
Crystal, a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, where in the world are you, Conrad?
I'm located in a city known as Hallandale Beach, which is based in Sunnyside, Florida, on the East Coast.
Okay, I was so totally thinking California when you said the whole beach thing, but yeah, that tracks with Florida as well. So let's get into this, Conrad. We have had a great, just like 30-minute conversation during our onboarding process about this. Like, when do you need help? How do you get that help as far as growing your business and scaling your business? What daily habits do you think make the biggest impact and effective time management?
Crystal, I think the most important aspects around time management are really understanding what are your priorities
Okay.
and where your energy is going to be throughout the day to allow you to meet those priorities. Right? Oftentimes people will talk about time management in the form of energy management as much as they talk about it in the form of priorities management. That's really what we're talking about when we speak about time. I've only got 24 hours. I got to spend a good amount of it sleeping. I got to spend a good amount of it eating and taking care of myself. And then what
Wow.
remains of that outside of social time and self-care time, there's the time I actually have to work. And throughout the day, I'm going to have different energy for different things. And I'm a unique person. So I might fall into the general trend of being someone who works really well right after I've gotten up. I might be someone who's more of a night owl. Either way, as you have certain proclivities to your time and how you want to operate. And really the spirit of your routines should be around, do I give myself time just to organize where I'm going to be, given where my energy is at its best? And am I focusing on the things that matter? Within a business context, there are 6 main categories that I like to highlight in my sort of administrative categorization of time. And I think depending on where you are in your business and what needs the most attention, you're going to look through those categories to determine where exactly you need to be at the most urgently and importantly.
Explain to us what is time blocking, Conrad, and then how can that improve efficiency for small business owners, for entrepreneurs?
So time blocking is really just the spirit of saying, given I know what it is that I need to do, I'm now going to forecast how much time I'm going to need and how I'm going to put time in my day to respect and hold myself accountable to performing something. It's one thing to have a to-do list. It's another thing to have a to-do schedule. And so within your schedule, you're going to create these blocks that conservatively, I'd like to think, protect the amount of time and maybe a little bit of buffer to allow you to get something accomplished. There are a lot of studies that show that if you give yourself room to focus and eliminate all other distractions, especially when you set your attention on saying, I'm going to say yes to this one thing, which means I'm going to say no to all the other million possible things, that's one of the best ways to keep your productivity where it matters in the elements that you actually need to put time on. And so that's time blocking's greatest zone of genius, frankly.
Now, earlier in the conversation, Conrad, you said that you thought it was 6 areas when it comes to outlining your schedule, working, time management. What are those 6 areas that you think people should focus on? And I'm sure, it's probably different for different people, but you're the expert here, so I want to hear what you think those areas are.
I can make some pretty general assumptions given everybody that I tend to talk to is in business ownership space. And I
Mhm.
know what types of things everybody cares about, despite the fact that businesses can be different in specific arenas and specific industries.
Correct.
you may find yourself saying, well, I think these specific tasks that I do probably fall into this category of yours, Conrad. I'm like, great, that's fine. Here are the categories as I would define them. And I usually put these in a sort of primary rank order, and I can go a little bit into that as well. So at the very top of the list is administration itself. If you want to even begin to organize yourself, you have to administrate. Administration is literally just time management.
Mm-hmm.
Next is finance. I can't work on my time if I don't work on my money. Money and time go hand in hand. They're the two main pedals in your car. One, you can never get back, but you can always press the lever on. You can always spend time. Money is something that you have to kind of work with depending on when you're flush with it versus when you're using it to spend on more time through help or through certain resources or to get educated or what have you, right? It's either an expense or an income, but you have to manage your finances second.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get into what I like to call the three core main operations that you will find across every business, no matter what. You got to serve, you got to sell, and you've got to market. And I'll do those things in that order. I would prioritize delivering the service of those whom you've already committed to doing so, right? Keep the money, reduce the churn, or eliminate it if you can, right? That's cash flow, is actually serving your relationships and fulfilling on your promises to them. Then you need to sell, meaning you need to increase the number of service delivery operations that you're going to commit to because that increases your cash flow. So you have to generate more business. And then in order to generate more business, you have to market yourself. You have to make yourself known to more people so that you have more opportunities to sell. Right. Then you get to their last category, which is kind of an interstitial layer that can exist across all 5 other systems. But the last situation is going to be partnerships. So who are you partnering with? Who are you collaborating with to market yourself better, to sell with others, to serve with others, to finance yourself with others, or to administrate with others? So partnerships becomes kind of a catch-all system for all these other relationships. They could be partners in the referral sense. They could be partners in the channel sense. They could be providers meeting you in certain obligations across those 5 things that I just highlighted. But at the end of the day, that's just an additional interstitial layer that goes into that core 5. Again, with those 3 being serve, sell, market in that order. Finance and admin being kind of like your pedal systems, right? Your how much input versus output am I going with?
Conrad, explain to us, what is the difference between busy and productive?
I think the most practical way to look at it is busy is just how occupying of yourself you are, how much of that time pedal you're just pressing on and just giving absolutely everything you have in terms of time to anything. It's very easy to be 100% busy. And for some people, it's really hard to not be busy because that kind of creates a certain anxiety in them of like, I have to hit that pedal. Like time is being wasted if I don't spend it.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, productivity literally just says, hey, regardless of how much of the pedal you're pushing, in fact, with consideration for how efficient you can be with not pushing on the pedal, how much output are you generating? And is it output towards what? Is it financial output? Are you making a lot more than you're expensing? Is it service delivery output? Are you producing a lot more value than it costs you in terms of the time and the energy and other resources? Same with selling. Does it take you the minimum amount of time to sell the most amount of opportunities in business? And finally, marketing and partnerships, the same deal, right? Can I generate the most amount of value in the least amount of time?
It seems like, and we'll get to the when do you know you need help, virtual assistants or whatever. We'll get to that. But it seems like if you are not breaking your time management, your time blocking into those 6 areas that you discussed, then you really are just busy. And I don't know if you're getting a return on your investment.
One could be productive and unaware. Of how productive necessarily. You could say I'm productive and then not really have a quantifiable understanding of what that entails. Maybe on a very grassroots level, you could just say, well, I'm putting in, all the hours of the day that I can afford to put in without exhausting myself, right? I'm running the marathon, if you will, and look at my bank account, look at my cash flow. I'm making money. And I could say, bravo, that's great. That seems sustainable, all things considered. But then when you start to get to the brass tacks of it, you start to really allocate and study where your time is going and which of these components of your time are actually producing this ultimate factor of, in this case, capital, right, of cash flow, as well as time flow. Again, like if you're putting in all this effort, but in order for you to sustain that effort, you have to keep putting in 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. Okay, how does that make you feel? What is that type of user experience? What does that provide for you as a quote unquote employee or operator of your own business entity or of someone else's? And does that find you well? Yeah, absolutely. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Conrad, how do leaders know which is more profitable with their time investment? Like what areas is more profitable for them for their time investment?
I mean, it really just boils down to a couple of main basic factors, but then there's almost like this quasi, I don't know what I don't know. Based on what you do know, your most value generating activities are typically going to be in the area where no one can serve like you can. And as a result, no one can produce value like you can. And as a result, no one can price the value of those services as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's all defined by the marketplace and your ability to sell all that effectively.
Right.
It could be that it's not so much that you are the most capable fulfiller of your market, but you're actually the most capable seller of your market. You're the most capable of generating the trust and the clarity of your offering to the marketplace, even if you just happen to have a really great fulfillment team on the other side. They're actually the ones who are doing the most by just being fulfillers, and you're supporting them you're supporting them and the business in the most valuable way possible by just focusing on selling. Maybe you're not even the key seller. Maybe the greatest value you can generate is to maximize the amount of market awareness that you have, that your business has, so that your sales and fulfillment representatives can go about maximizing their particular performance because you're in your greatest zone of genius, right? All of these things can be ultimately attributed to, again, the financial cost and the administrative cost and the net gain resulted. You can track all of these things.
It really is a math equation.
It doesn't I hate to say capitalism has given everything quantitative value, but you're playing a game that's been quantified for a reason.
Yes, absolutely. How do you know, or how can people determine what is the priority when everything is urgent? Like, I got to do this right now. I got to do this right now. How do you prioritize that?
So one perspective on this is that all things have equal value. And if you hold on to that perspective super tightly, then Crystal, the answer is it's impossible to determine what is the most valuable thing. But already I can imagine you're listening to that going, that's not true. Things have different value at different time because of the sense of urgency and importance that they have.
Correct.
The reason I set my frame up for admin, finance, serve, sell, market is typically because if all things are considered equal, if you can administrate a little bit more effectively, everything downstream improves. If you can finance more effectively, everything downstream improves. Again, service-wise, you don't want to lose the money you're already generating. So
Correct.
If you have to focus on fulfillment because that's in jeopardy, go focus on fulfillment. If fulfillment's going well, then the next problem you have to ask yourself is, am I doing good justice to my prospects? Am I doing good justice to creating new clients? Okay, if that's the next layer, go focus on that layer. Then marketing. And then partnerships, it depends on where that part of the partnership is. If the partnership is on the marketing side, that may not be as important or as resourceful if it's partnerships on the sales side or the serving side or the finance side or the administration side, right? But I've created that litmus, generally speaking. And the whole idea is that if the engine is running quietly on all 5 of these cylinders, with partnerships just kind of being a subsidiary component of these 5 cylinders, then go find out administratively what you can do to improve. Otherwise, you've got to listen to these other parts of the engine and take ownership of a priority around those things. Generally speaking, exceptions will of course apply.
Right. So how do people track where their time goes during the week and during the day? I don't know if there's like a platform or something they can use, or if it's pen to paper, but how do you track where I'm spending my time?
So before I get into like what's the most practical and efficient approach, I'm going to
Mhm.
kind of highlight to your point, like what's the most effective theory around tracking time. In spirit, you will need time no matter what to sit down and retrospect on where you've been putting your time. Bar none. If you want to know what's the best way to track your time, it is that you need to at the very least, invest time. Again, that admin operation. You have to find time to manage time. From that prioritization, pen and paper works. I love using my Google Calendar as a ledger. So although I can forecast and say, oh, I think I'm going to spend the next 24 hours doing this, the last 24 hours, I will modify my calendar blocks to make it look like where I actually spent my time. I will add blocks where they didn't exist. I will stretch or shrink blocks depending on how much time I actually spent on a certain thing. Be very thoughtful about how I document what it is how I name my calendar blocks, how I describe, how I put certain details and notes in the description if I have to. And again, that's not the most effective method. It is a effective method. If people want to do pen and paper because that's how they find themselves well, they love that haptic feedback experience, power to you. In the most idealistic sense, you get to spend the least amount of energy and time required to self-document, to self-retrospect. I've come up with ways through virtual assistants, for example, where I'll sit down with an executive assistant every 24 hours. And for 30 minutes, I just tell that executive assistant what I spent the last 24 hours on and what I think I'm going to do the next 24. And they'll help me catch up with all the documentation details because all I had to do was just talk it out loud, right? It's easy for me to do it that way. Some people don't like talking it out. They'd rather write it out or they'd rather do some other approach. Then you have these very cool tools, these time tracking tools, these activity tracking tools. Sometimes they get a little Big Brother-esque, they sort of feel that way. But the job of those tools is to streamline your ability to recall where you've been, especially in a digital sense, right? They're basically looking at, hey, which window screens did you have open and for how long? And then you can provide context as you so need to establish, oh yeah, this time and this particular, window when I was activating it, that was part of this particular operation, this commitment to this client or to this sales op or to this marketing endeavor or like thing that I've got going on. So you can start to, add those contextual bits, but something has already done a bit of the homework for you of kind of keeping track of where you were, where your attention was to the best of its ability, right? Context is the hardest thing that no system is going to be able to capture for you perfectly. You have to submit what your perspective of your time was and why you were doing it. And so again, that's the minimum viable thing that you have to do on a practical level.
Now, my follow-up question is, why is it important to track your time and know what you're doing, where you are, why you're doing it?
This is, again, we go back to how can I evaluate my performance and determine if I'm just being busy for the sake of being busy or if I'm actually doing something productive. And it may be overkill in one extreme to try to meticulously analyze so much that you're actually just wasting time versus, hey, I recognize within a minimum viable degree of self-awareness through this process that I actually recognize, hey, this time that I'm performing isn't actually generating any value. And it's not well on its way to doing so either, right? You can envision certain projects requiring a level of input of resources in both time and or money in order to later on produce some type of value that you can expect based on whatever inference and visions you have, whatever historical data that you can look at in terms of, when the market, tends to do social media in my industry, the output when we do certain quality is that we get this many new business opportunities, this many new inquirers downstream or, the next day or what have you. That can all be measured if you take the time to measure it.
I think that's the most important part, taking the time, because people are so, whether it's busy or productive, like you said, you have to find the time to figure out your time. So that's the most important part. Now, Conrad, tell us, how did you get into this space of time management and knowing when people need to reach out for help?
Crystal, I was a biomedical engineer by study. I thought
I did not expect that.
Yeah. I was going to grow tissue cells out of a lab for like the rest of my life. I was going to do bioengineering. I I fell in love with business because I found it to be a much more expansive problem. I liked interacting with people and discussing these more complex problems than just, can I keep these cells alive in a petri dish? And granted, looking back, I'm certain I could have gotten into more advanced sections of my field and maybe have enjoyed myself in the sort of rigmarole of that level of complexity. But all things aside, as much as I liked engineering, I liked business more at the time that I was studying. And I decided I wanted to build my own startup. Like, I got really brazen and really just, somewhat naively and stubbornly, I just took on this expectation that, like, I'm just going to go build my own business, like, right out of college. And so I tried. And unfortunately, I tried to do something really difficult in a time where I still had a lot to learn. And the biggest painful lesson that I was experiencing was, I can't be an engineer, a founder, and a guy that pays the bills all at the same time within reason without really, really, really just hating myself, right? Just feeling like I'm just being super tough on my expectations and then just failing them and just be like, oh my God, this is miserable. So I had to sit down for a minute at one point and, like, really go through my own, like, kind of like philosophical check. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? I feel like I'm falling behind. And yet, here I am. What do I do next? And during that whole, catharsis period, I was in a program in the middle of New York City. It's one of my favorite programs to recommend. It's called the Startup Leadership Program, built by founders for founders. Great network, great folks. I talked to a good number of party members from my cohort, and I was just wanting to ask them, like, how do you make sense of all this? Like, y'all have the same 24 hours I do. I know we live different lives. I'm curious to know what's going on in those, because I want to understand how you relate to your obligation and your commitment to making your own startup and building your own business, despite whatever's in your way. Because here's what was in my way, and it really, really sucked. Those folks ended up really giving me their own, trials and temptations, joys and sorrows. We had a nice chat about it. It was fun. I learned a lot. I felt like they got something out of it. And most importantly, for some of these folks in particular, they really shared an appreciation for the sense that, hey, Conrad, because you asked, I really took the time to retrospect with you because of all the ways you were asking me these questions and because of your inquiry. And I really enjoyed that. And I would love to do that again sometime. And so I found value in that. And I decided to keep pursuing that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, while I was talking to these individuals, I realized, like, for one, I was, no longer working on my own projects because I had no interest in. I had to abandon it. It just wasn't sustainable for me. But since I had the time and these folks were talking about things I needed help with, I was like, hey, I'm a founder like you. I know what it's like to have to build a business. I understand some of the things that you need help with. How can I help?
Oh, wow.
And so I started off as, sometimes in some cases, just a glorified virtual assistant, a glorified time management therapist, from founder to founder. But I was helping. And for some of those relationships, I was able to get paid to do that work, right? I was creating value in the marketplace. And I was like, okay, let's go keep doing that. 6 years later, here we are.
Wow. That's an amazing story. That is an amazing story, Conrad. Okay, so let's lean into, some of what you were talking about. When to hire a virtual assistant, when to hire like an in-person assistant to work in the office or whatever that looks like. What signs even indicate that it's time to get help? It's time to get an assistant.
So we'll do a couple things here, because I know earlier I kind of left on an unspoken note about, what of the value that I know I'm producing and capable of producing. There are things that I don't know. And so part of my sort of self-awareness journey around business was, okay, at some point, I start to sort of engage enough with the market that I know the value for my time that I'm able to collect is $100. I'm going to do very simple math here. So $100 I can generate for my time per hour doing X, Y, Z, ABC. I guess the most natural logic I should have is I should maximize my time realistically, reasonably, with as many $100 per hour time as I can. Right? And that's obviously going to come out of service delivery. Now, with that said, in order for me to get that $100 per hour time on my calendar, there are all these other things that I have to do in marketing, in sales, in finance, in administration, in order to get to just that $100 an hour service delivery aspect, right? And so by that logic, my first I don't know what I don't know question should be, what does it cost to replace me in all these things that presumably don't generate as much value as $100 per hour, right? That's one of the givens that you need to have in the space. Is like, I am going to do the most valuable thing, and therefore everything else that has to get done in order for me to do that has to be worth less or less enough that I can kind of afford this sort of merchant equation of like, this is more worth my money than it is worth my time to be doing. And so now we're going to, again, just to get the virtual assistant question in, where do I envision this task being doable by someone who may be worth $10 an hour? So now we start to get into some given unknowns, which is, what does it cost for someone else to do this? What does it cost for something else to do this? Because sometimes it's not even a question of human being, services. Maybe it's a question of like technology as a service, software as a service that's supposed to be able to do this one task for me that gets me to my most valuable task set. Okay, now I just have to figure out what it costs to get that set up, to procure that solution and bring it into my operational workflow, to bring in that VA, to bring in that platform, that CRM, whatever, what have you. But once I start to have an idea of what those maths are, I could probably, without getting too meticulous about it, I could probably ballpark my return on investment and go, okay, if I do this and I get these talents in here, I'm going to buy back my time. Direct return. Indirect return, but most necessary for sustainability, is I now have the time to go serve more, or I now have the time to just operate more sustainably. That's the answer to your question.
How do you know? Okay. How do you know when to get an in-person assistant versus a virtual assistant?
It really comes down to, what do I need to get done physically in a specific location versus what do I need to get done digitally in a location that anyone can access, given we live in a world of the internet and I could, provide anybody access to this system from wherever they stand. And if we get into the logic of globalization and the cost of services across the world, where is the most cost-effective talent or solution that I can access safely, securely, responsibly, that is going to meet my professional needs in this particular workflow for me on my behalf?
Is there ever a time, and I feel like there is, but I'm going to let you answer it. Is there ever a time when you need both, the in-person and the virtual?
Sure. I mean, if you're living in a perfect world, you can get help for both of these things in parallel, operating successfully for you in minimal time, given the cost of getting that help can be afforded, and you can very quickly turn that time that you've bought back into more revenue generating activity. Or at least be happy that minus the cost of goods sold that you've now incurred, or the cost of operating expenses, you're still making enough that you now are sustainably happy with the amount of time you actually have to commit in order to keep the system running.
Once you hire help, whether that's in person or virtual, how do you know what's the first thing or the first few things you need to delegate to the help, to the assistant? Let me say that.
Again, we can break it down into pure math and say, I know that it costs me an hour a day to do this task. I know that I can put that hour somewhere else and generate a lot more revenue at some point, because again, sometimes you can't just turn an hour into a revenue generating activity just because you bought the time back. You can't just immediately make that switch. Sometimes there's time involved in making that transition. But let's just say, within reason, you've got that power to say, this is something that takes me an hour a day. And it turns out I've identified from the marketplace that this is the most cost-effective and quality guaranteeing solution to replace me. Great, start there. Just from a pure math standpoint. Now we start to get into other aspects of that pure math that are not so much about how much time do I put in, but also how much energy does this take for me? Because maybe something doesn't take you a lot of time, but because it costs you a lot of energy to do, it may end up being a struggle anyway. And so now you have to maybe consider almost indirectly, well, how much energy does this cost? And does that energy end up producing difficulties for me later on in my day, Or does it just give me a foul mood? And does that reduce my overall quality of performance elsewhere in my time and obligations? Right? That may be the equation you run on more effectively than just pure math time. Like, I love doing these things, but I can't do these for an hour a day because I just can't afford it, or I don't want to afford it. I want to afford to do bigger and better things. Okay. Cool.
Talk about the training aspect of getting an assistant, Conrad, because I believe that a lot of people think you get the assistant and then you just turn them loose, but you have to train them and equip them to be able to help you.
It depends. If you're hiring an assistant who has no background and no experience in the thing that you're asking them to do, then you're going to probably have to expect to teach them everything there is to know about what it is that you want them to do. And yeah, that may prove difficult. Whatever it is that you may be assigning them may be complex. It may be simple. It may be well documented. It may be all in your head. The most ideal situation is that you haven't just hired any old assistant. You've practically hired an associate level individual who operates under the assistant's capacity of only serving you towards these particular objectives, right? You can effectively set them loose on the task because they've seen this stuff before. They know what to do, and they can kind of take lead and just ask you for what they need in order for them to be successful. And so only the time you have to commit is just that minimum viable time to get them set up and to get them into the system of things that they need. And even better, maybe they can help you set up those systems of things so that you are less and less required to be involved anytime they need to get something from the system as opposed to you in order to complete their objective. That's
how does someone maintain trust and accountability with a virtual assistant? Because you can't see them, you can't touch them, you just have to believe that they're doing what you're asking them to do.
So there are some very meticulous ways you can track somebody, and then there's some very healthy ways to do so. The most meticulous way, which I don't recommend, is to literally watch them 24/7 or to watch them like a hawk. That's not healthy. That's not helpful. It doesn't save you any time. It only adds stress to the relationship. You have to trust professionals to be able to do what they're doing. In God we trust. In everyone else we contract. So you can set that. The original quote is from the U.S. Navy, is in God we trust, and all others we track.
Okay.
So per your contract with a professional, you're going to set very clear expectations for what you want. They're going to set very clear expectations for what it is that they're going to need in order to do these things for you. Both of you have to come to your side of the table to make that accomplished. Money is just a means of validating the quantity of value that is being exchanged so that the VA in question can perform sustainably and with discretion to the fact that if there are other opportunities in the marketplace, they won't be so heavily incentivized to just go elsewhere because they're being underpaid, right? You have to make it operate. You have to make it sustainable for them. And you have to make it sustainable for yourself. But through that contract and through the commitment within that contract that says, hey, I'm actually going to track and give you reports. I'm going to communicate with you in a certain manner. I'm going to set expectations that bridge our trust through action that shows that we're both staying on top of the same page to this in a way that's efficient to you so that you know things are getting done, but you don't have to be a hawk watching every single aspect of it being completed.
What do you think are some common mistakes that people make when they hire their first assistant?
You may hire the wrong type of person. You may be so desperate to get help that you will hire whomever is agreeing to help you, even if they may not be the right fit. They may not be the right fit technically, meaning they may not just be able to do the thing that you need them to do, or you may be over entrusting them to be professionally able to lead on taking care of something for you when they lack the skills and the experience and the capabilities. Those may all be, death sentences effectively for that relationship, because they're just going to create more problems. And honestly, the one of the biggest challenges with hiring incorrectly in the VA side is not just a failed experience, but it's also then generating a trauma that you now have to recover from in order to hire your next assistant with more grace. because now you're going to be a lot more, maybe you be a lot more protected and cautious and secure, but that may also come to backfire on you when someone who's actually trustworthy is coming in to help you, and you can't trust them, right? So you get paranoid, you get anxious, and now you're in a bad headspace when it comes to working with talent, period. I could go on. You could be a very poor delegator. You could ask for one thing and then ask for another thing and then change your mind again. And then, every time you switch, you create stress and anxiety and confusion for someone who just wants a very clear set of instructions. Again, ideally, they can take lead and support you, even just generally speaking, even if the task that they need to learn from you is something that's very particular to your workflow, very particular to your industry and your service model, or your marketing, or however you want to do something. But even so, you want to create clarity. You don't want to create confusion. You want to have something well documented, even if that documentation just means, hey, I'm going to go on this Zoom screen call with you, and I'm going to walk you through what I do, and I'm going to tell you step by step and go through it slowly and nicely and thoughtfully. I'm going to let you ask me any questions you may have, but I'm going to explain it to you without coming across maniacal and distracted and going all over the place, right? That's another big, huge mistake is, folks end up screwing up the ability to delegate by just making it impossible to understand what it is you're even delegating.
I was thinking, then I'm gonna get to my next question, Conrad. I was thinking when you were talking about like hiring an assistant and you hire someone who has absolutely no idea what it is you're doing within the company, I feel like that would be a mistake because you got to completely train this person, which takes so much time, so much energy. And then you have to give grace for when they when they have mistakes and they mess up.
Right.
I thought that would be a mistake as well.
It depends. So when you can't afford, in the administrative sense, when you can't afford a mistake in the thing that you're trying to delegate, you need to afford financially to find the talent that's professional enough and experienced enough to meet you where you are with minimum room for error.
Okay.
When you have space, when you can breathe more and you can actually bring on early, young, eager, ambitious talent that just doesn't know things yet, they haven't had enough professional experience yet. Okay, you're saving on them, you're saving money financially, but you're spending more administratively. You're hoping in the long run, they're going to be as successful as a professional who can come in much sooner, but be much more expensive. And yet you're going to save money down the line because you brought them early. You had a lower rate negotiated with them because that's what the market rate demanded, that this type of individual is capable of. You worked through some of the mistakes. You provided a little bit of professional courtesy and training and grace, and you powered through it because you had the time to afford to. You're always, again, it's these two pedals here, finance and admin, right? Which one can you put more of at a given point?
Yes. And I feel like the pedals for me and maybe, people that are listening would be time and money. Like you're going back and forth with, which one is more important? Is my time more important or is my money more important?
In the spirit of industry, everyone sells something different. Everyone's got something unique to bring to the marketplace conventionally. But we all have the same two pedals. As business owners, time and money.
Right.
What's supposed to happen in a perfect world is you've got all the time and you don't have any of the money or very little of it to start off. So you end up putting in a lot of time figuring everything out, putting it all together, generating just enough capital to make sense of what you just did. Right, to basically break even. And it may not be easy at first. You may cut into some of your savings or what have you, but that's what you did. Now, once you've figured out some of those things, now you can start to ease off the time pedal because you've got a little bit of money generated now. And now you're going to start to press a little bit on the money pedal and start to bring in others who are going to take over the things that now give you more time release. Now, with that time back, go generate more money. Go do more of the things you do them more correctly with improvement. Now that you have time to kind of think about how to be a little bit more strategic than just pure tactic.
Right.
And again, it's kind of this almost like, if anyone has a stick shift, you'll know what I'm talking about here, where you kind of have to go up in the gears.
Right. Yes.
it's the same spirit. We're all merchants in that exact respect.
Let's talk about AI. We see it everywhere. We hear about, AI like Chat GPT and so many others. How does AI help streamline your day?
It can be, it's arguably one of the most, if not the most transformative user experiences we've ever had, right? When it performs correctly, when you're able to operate with it correctly, it can be one of the most cost-effective experiences in which you can generate all manners of documentation of things that you're thinking about and looking for answers on. It can help you plan out your day if you give it information about what's going on. One of my favorite perspectives that was shared with me by an AI expert was AI is effectively trying to create a world simulation. And in that world simulation, you're trying to tell that AI that you are the most important thing and that you're trying to achieve certain goals. And what the AI wants from you is it wants as much understanding of what's going on in the real world and how it's reflecting upon you in order to give you an idea of what the game plan is to meet your objectives in its simulated version of the future. I find that a really cool concept to kind of attach to, where in practicality, you need to tell the AI, here's where my situation's at. Here are the things I'd like to get to. Can you please help me? And sometimes there's a bit of a, can you help me to help you to help me kind of deal, where you're kind of asking the AI to ask you what questions it needs to get answered in order for you to get the answers that you're ultimately looking for. All with a degree of salt.
Right. Absolutely. How can AI help find leaks in your schedule?
It's interesting because there's some platforms that have really done a justice. I'm thinking of one called Motion that has presented itself as being very AI driven. When we talk about leaks, we can't just talk about, we have to talk about what it means to waste time. Okay. I think it's one thing, again, to bring energy back into the equation and say, are you wasting time because you have a lot of low energy right now and you need to restore it? Okay, then the most effective thing for your time is to go rest and recuperate. And we can recognize that if you're self-aware enough to say, after I perform certain things, I become exhausted. Or after I fail to sleep well at night, or I fail to eat right, that energy comes back to haunt me. That debt comes back to haunt me later on. All right, well, eat well, sleep well, like take care of yourself. Right? Or don't take on too many consultation calls if those things end up really blowing you out after, 3 back-to-back sessions. Like that's something to be mindful of. So there's a broader sustainability to account for. And sometimes AI systems will help you to almost retrospect on that in a way that they can call you out and say, hey, have you tried doing this differently? There are tools like Rescue Time. There are systems that are trying to recognize, again, going back to these activity watchers and their sort of big brother appearance, they're trying to give you insights into your own behavior, especially when you're behaving unconsciously, which is something we naturally do because we don't sit here and meditate and have self-awareness on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute basis. It's too consciousness is very energy consuming. So we tend to run into some passive habit performance and fall to the nature of our systems, if you will. These systems, as a result, these platforms try to give you insight and say, hey, this is where you tend to slough off. AI can then maybe give you some recommendations on what you might want to do about it. Again, grain of salt, they're not people. They are the culmination of word banks that have been processed to sound smart. So you have to have critical thinking. And or you got to work with people who've got the critical thinking and they know what you're doing and they know how to talk to you. But AI can be very cost effective if those solutions are a little out of reach.
What is the danger? And this is me assuming that there's danger, Conrad. What is the danger of becoming over-reliant on AI for your time management?
Much like with any dependency, if the system fails all of a sudden, if AWS goes down and suddenly you can't access your chat system.
Oh, yes.
it all comes down to, if push came to shove, could you still run your system as best as you could manually, right? If DoorDash wasn't around to get you food, could you still cook for yourself? Could you still make a meal? Could you still survive? Right? At least until DoorDash is back online. Not even my favorite example, frankly, but it's the spirit of that, right? It's dependency. Yes. And with AI, one of the biggest dependencies that you may be cultivating is, you may be, and sometimes dangerously so, you may be relying on something else to think critically for you.
What skills do you think, and this is me wanting you to think into the future, Conrad, what skills do you think future assistants will need to work effectively alongside AI? Because that's coming. It's probably already here.
It's already here.
Definitely coming.
It's already here. And AIs or assistants are pushing, I think, pretty progressively to adopt anything that's thrown at them. Yeah. So what's funny for me is that, given we live in a world where, as much as AI is producing all this value sometimes, within the capacity of productivity, people are still working harder than ever. It's so funny to me when I watch this reality where people go, oh my God, AI is amazing. And then what they realize is, oh God, I don't have time to implement AI, even when AI is designed to help me implement this completed workflow faster, better, smarter. And so what do? They go to the VA and they go, you do it. And right. So the main fundamental lesson that every VA is going to learn is that AI is just going to be a natural part of their workflow. They're going to be the ones probably interacting with assistants on the worker to task level, while business owners try to work with AI on a ownership of systems level.
Can you explain that ownership of systems level?
In principle, business owners have two options in terms of how they own their business. They can be an owner and they can be an operator. If you're an operator, you're a worker. If you're a worker, you're doing tasks. You're employed to serve the business on a marketing, sales, service, finance, administration, and partnership basis. Okay. Right? If you're an owner, you've built systems to address those things, and systems can include people and technology.
Yes, I feel like
so that's the real power of a business owner when they're really thinking, and that's what we actually consider to be true entrepreneurship. Is when you don't just work to solve a problem, but you actually build a system to solve a problem, and then you are no longer a 100% or even any percent contributor to that system. The system can run independently without you. You own the system, therefore you own the means of its, you own the fruits of its labor, and to whatever degree in which you want to make that business more or less sustainable for you, the systems that you work with and the people that work under it, you generate capital through your ownership. We can get into capitalism later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, Conrad. But I was thinking as you were speaking that being a owner, I feel like that should be the goal. That should be the ultimate goal. Maybe not for everyone, because some people still want to like get in there and get their hands dirty and do the work, but eventually
I still do that. I come in and serve clients as a consultant, and I love to do that. It's one of my favorite ways to progress my professional capabilities. I can then take some of those things back with me and improve my systems. I get paid to build other people's systems, right? Yeah. Because they can't do it in that particular arena. There's nothing wrong with working. There is depending on the need that you're trying to solve for, and this is a really interesting sort of philosophy to take on. You may be the one to realize that it's not enough to meet the market's needs, especially where it needs it most, by just working at it. It may be the bigger and better responsibility to say, I need to actually work on the system that works on solving this problem, because the system is what can scale and can serve the mass of the problem, not just, oh, I've fulfilled my duty to this one individual or to this one company. you reap the rewards accordingly. In business ownership, everyone talks about it from the perspective, oh my God, this person made millions of dollars generating this business that sort of works for itself, right? Everyone talks about the glory of that, but I think that the philosophy that you should really capture is, I'm not just solving this problem one time, I'm solving this problem hundreds of times, because I've set up a process that's capable of taking care of that without me having to be the Atlas shrugged factor, right? I'm not carrying the entire weight of that problem at scale on my shoulders.
Conrad, you have been in this space for over 6 years now, in the space of time management and helping other people with that. What is your intention in this space?
I started out caring about the mental health challenges that I was faced with when I was overburdened and overwhelmed and taking on too much. He's now 99 years old, my father.
Wow, congratulations. 30. That's a blessing.
We'll live forever. So far, so good. I think there are so many more important things for us to be doing with our time than just working. I know we also have to work to sustain our means of living. I want for society at large to afford the time to figure out how to build sustainable systems that help us meet our demands while giving us a quality of life that lets us focus on our family, focus on society's bigger problems that don't necessarily directly involve our work. I love civic duty. I love the responsibility to living since we're here, and to do so in a way that's well for us. I'm personally, I feel responsible for just being aware of all of that and contributing to that in a positive way. I think that's what good really is all about. And it has to be understood. It has to be studied. It has to be measured in order to be performed on, just like how we work. So that's been the whole spirit of my company from day one. And it's why we call our company Well Aware. That's what I care about principally at most.
Yes. Okay, so my final question for you, Conrad, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast? But you have to help me get them on.
Crystal, I beat you to it.
Yes.
I really wanted to recommend you to Tom Van Dyke. Tom has been an amazing collaborator in my space, and one of the business models that he taught me to really appreciate and to have in my back pocket as a solution for helping me bridge the gap between folks who needed help and who couldn't afford it. Again, going back to that time and money pedal. When the money pedal is waning and people really, really need the help to buy back their time, it becomes challenging when you go up to them and say, I've got a solution for you, but it's going to cost you $1,000, right? And again, just to make simple math here, and they go, that's hard. Like, I can't afford that. Like, please look at how my current situation is. I'm stretched. I'm in the wrong place. I know I've made mistakes, but I still need this help. Can you please help me? Tom has presented to me this retainer model that says, look, I want to reduce my cost of doing business with you to, let's say, $500. I just want, in exchange for that, I want to be able to take a percentage of the business that I'm going to help you gain during this process of helping you buy back your time, be more sales effective, serve more, market more effectively, partner better, whatever. Again, we go back to what are the categories that you're helping someone out with? All of them or one of them, it doesn't matter. If I can reduce my cost for you, but gain skin in the form of success that aligns with your being able to afford more, let's set up a model that over time gives you that room to breathe and gives me some reward for the risk I'm taking. Because again, the principle in the marketplace is, if you can't afford my $1,000 service because that's what it's worth, and yet someone else is capable of, I'm going to go to that person. But that means I've just left a good client in the dust, because unfortunately there's situations where a little bit more dire. You have to make that decision, but the model itself, I think, is awesome. And that's why I think you should talk to Tom.
Thank you. I am excited to speak with him. I have never heard of a concept like that, and I really, really like it. So I cannot wait for him to educate and explain how that concept is beneficial and mutually beneficial, because that's what we're all looking for. But Conrad, oh my goodness, thank you so much for being on my podcast. You're the first guest that I have had that has spoken and educated about time management and that two pedal system that we were talking about with, your time versus your money in all aspects of the company. So thank you so much.
Grateful to be here. Crystal, thank you.
Absolutely. To my community, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. You can get Conrad's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.